forge your inner armor. Welcome to the Inner Armor Podcast with Dr. Timothy Royer, where we explore ways to train our brains and bodies to become dynamically resilient so that we can all, from professional athletes to ordinary people, perform at our potential. Welcome to the Inner Armor Podcast. I'm here, as usual, with Doc Royer. Doc, you want to say hi?
Yeah, it's good to be with you, Greg. I'm excited about today's podcast.
Oh, I know. Now, Doc, You're down in Jacksonville now, and we have a real special guest who's calling in today. I think he's calling in from Florida, but most people don't know him from Florida. They know him from Minnesota because we have the quarterback of the Minnesota Vikings, Kirk Cousins. Entered the league in 2012, 10 years in the NFL, and we are so excited to have him on the podcast today. Welcome, Kirk.
Oh, thanks for having me on, guys. It's an honor to be with you.
Kirk, you and Dr. Royer have a long history, and we're going to explore that in this episode today and some of the things that have helped you to achieve what you've achieved using some of the technologies and methodologies that Doc has developed. But I want to start off by sort of throwing this out. You have a pretty unique job. In fact, it's a job that only at any given time, 32 people on this planet can do. And so what does it take to become capable and prepared for this kind of a role? It is pretty unique.
Yes, and I don't even know that when I was a fan of football growing up that I understood just what it does take for a pro quarterback to do his job at a high level. Now living it, it takes far more than I ever realized, but I'm living a dream, and it's a real privilege to be in the position I'm in. And I'd like to do it for as long as my body and mind will allow me to. But it sure does take a whole lot. And Dr. Royer has been a big part of that journey for me, of helping me going back to my college days, better understand what it would take and how to maximize my abilities so that I could, in a very competitive environment, be able to excel. And my relationship with Dr. Royer and what he's taught me has made a very meaningful difference to help me reach the highest levels of competition in pro football.
How did the two of you meet? How did that come about? And what did you start working on together?
Well, by the nature of what Doc does, he does need to educate people. And so he was doing one of many, seminars where he had an opportunity to kind of share his work in neuroscience and how it can improve people's lives. And my dad happened to be in the audience and heard him speak. And while my dad thought it would help him, certainly, he really came away saying, my son, who's a quarterback, I think this is just right down Main Street for what he needs and what would help him unlock, that next level of his ability. And this was my senior year of college. And so my dad was able to make the connection. My dad was wise enough, to see the benefits there and connected us. And Dr. Royer happened to have an office not far from where I was playing college football in East Lansing, Michigan. And we were able to meet semi-regularly throughout my senior football season. And I remember after working with him for the latter 2/3 of my football season rather diligently, my offensive coordinator and play caller for our team going into our last game of the year was taking stock of the season and looking back. And he said, Kirk, it was about 1/3 of the way into the season when your play just took off and you never looked back. And the last 2/3 of this season, you played by far the best football you've ever played at Michigan State. And I was doing the math and made the connection that was right when I started working with Dr. Royer. And so I kind of tucked that note away. And to this day, I continue to see a correlation between the work that I've done with him and the times where I've been more diligent with it, and then a correlation to playing at my highest levels. And I finally made that concrete connection over many times a couple of years ago, where I then said, what, I'm no longer going to be having these seasons of life where I'm less diligent. I'm just going to always be diligent to make sure that correlation always exists. And so that's really helped me in many ways.
Well, hey, Doc, what was it like when you first met Kirk? I mean, what did you see in him What potential did you see in him in terms of what he could achieve, and what were the areas that you identified that he needed to work on?
Yeah, I mean, I can't say that I saw where we would be today or where he would be today, which is, really way beyond probably any expectation. I just wanted him to kind of succeed in the moment with what he was working with and kind of take one step at a time. And I think Kirk will speak to many times. We would have those conversations where the cart would get way ahead of the horse. And whether it was him or me, we would say, hey, let's just deal with today. Like, what is it we've got today? Because we don't know through all the ups and downs and things that happen. But some of the things that stuck out when I first met Kirk was I remember giving him an assignment when he came in. We were 2 weeks out from him playing Ohio State, down at Ohio State. And I don't know exactly what the comment was, but it's something like, hey, can you fix me in 2 weeks? Or something like that. I'm like, well, you're already good as you are, but I don't know what I can do in 2 weeks. But there was a rocky start and kind of, just some tension and some different things. And I was like, I don't know what we can do in 2, but let's try to work on your breathing and your heart rate variability and coherence of your heart. And I remember giving him this assignment, and I'm like, he's not going to do this, in the back of my mind. It was, I want you to breathe 3 times a week, 3 times a day for 5 minutes, and we'll connect in like 7 days. And I remember looking at the equipment, and I could not believe how many times he had trained. It was way beyond 3. It was like 5 or 6 a day. And I'm like, oh, this is a different character here. This isn't just somebody who, they talk about wanting to be better. This guy is literally preparing to be better and is going beyond what the expectations. So that for me was really encouraging from the outside. And whether that had been football or anything else, I think that's just part of Kirk's personality is when he's in, he is in and dialed in really strong. And that's a big piece of success for anybody, but particularly Kirk, watching him always follow through beyond even what he's expected to do is pretty amazing.
Wow. So this must have been what 11, 12 years ago? Kirk, your senior year?
This was 2011. This was the fall of 2011.
Sure.
And, now we're in 2023. So
sure.
It's been a good sample size now to be able to look back on and take stock of.
Well, now thinking about that though, right? So if there's one thing that even us just casual fans, or maybe really less than casual fans in the NFL know, is that longevity and resilience is the name of the game in the NFL. And you have had an incredible longevity and resilience. I mean, how many players came out in that draft that are, not playing today? And here you are playing at the top, the highest possible levels. So what would you say has contributed that kind of resilience? And I imagine that it's not just physical resilience, was sort of obvious, but also sort of mental and emotional resilience for all the kinds of pressures and stresses that your career in the NFL must have brought you. What do you do to work on that resilience? And has Inner Armour or Dr. Royer, has any of this, been useful to that?
Certainly, I think that it's been unique. The ability to play week after week, year after year. Now I've been a starting quarterback for 8 seasons, and I look back, and there just haven't been many quarterbacks who have done that. And there's certainly good fortune. There's certainly people praying for me for protection, but I do think that the ability to understand that we there's such a thing as pushing yourself too hard and too fast, and it's important to understand to pace your system and to come down from that redlining feeling that you have as a starting quarterback. You can't live at that all the time. And I think when I met Dr. Royer as a senior in college, I've been living at that for several years as a starting quarterback of a major college school. So for me, it was learning to get to that sympathetic state when you need it, but then to go to a parasympathetic state when you need that. And sort of, learning to relax, learning to pace yourself, learning to breathe correctly, and to really see that rest is just as important as the moments of stress and the moments that you think are what are defining. And I think that ability to pace myself and to learn to have those ups and then to come back down in a healthy way to then go back up. I had never been taught, never learned. No one ever talks about that. You really just think you're just supposed to redline all the time and bring it all the time. And if you do that leads to something called burnout that I think most of us are familiar with. So the fact that I can now look back after these 12 years and say that, has it been a stressful journey? Absolutely. Have there been challenges? Yes. But that burnout feeling, I'm 34 and I tell you, I feel better, healthier, more capable at 34 than I did at 24. Mm-hmm. And with the approach I'm taking, I'd like to be able to say at 44, that I feel better. And so that's where I'm working towards. And I think where Dr. Royer's experience, his counsel, his techniques have really made a meaningful difference.
Yeah, Kirk, can you think of like mentally, I go back to those first few years where we're just processing a lot of different things, mentally, stress wise. Can you think of like any examples of things that have changed in kind of how you see things or respond to things that feeds into that resilience? Or maybe on the flip side was making the resilience harder early on?
Sure. Well, I think it's certainly in some of our sessions where we would just talk and I'd be able to kind of unload what I'm processing. You'd kind of help me better organize it and put it in the right perspective. You would often say, whatever the challenge is in front of you that a part of you wants to avoid or would wish wasn't there or would love to complain about, whatever that is, let's acknowledge it for what it is. And you would often say, like, let's put it on the shelf and like identify it as such and not make it more than it is, but just understand it's a entity. And then also you'd say, when you call it what it is, you still have to go through with it. Like you're just going to get back on the horse and you got to keep going. And I think that message of getting back on the horse and keep going, it was one that I think ties very directly with resiliency. That doesn't have to be easy. People think that, well, if I'm resilient, it's because I want to run to the challenge. And many times you gave me permission that it's okay to not want to run to that challenge. That's okay. But you're going to run to the challenge. You're going to do it. And that's also okay. That if you have questions, you may not feel all for it. It doesn't mean that, that you should walk away. And so that ability to kind of encourage me to lean in rather than lean out and to understand that those doubts or those fears are natural, sort of gave me permission to feel okay with what I was processing.
Yeah, I remember do you remember when we always used to talk about riding the elevator
Yes, you got to get back on the elevator.
Yeah. And we would use this example of like, people that are scared of elevators, if they don't get on the elevator, they're going to use the stairs the rest of their life. And you had some particular things that were creating anxiety or stress. And we were like, man, we got to get on the elevator. We just got to ride the elevator, not avoid that experience, but when it comes, embrace it. Because the more we ride the elevator, the more it becomes normal, right?
Yes.
And you remember those things, and we'd kind of identified those. And it's so interesting to watch you like this last year take on some of those challenges that in the earlier were maybe wanting to be avoided, that you just like, they probably still create stress, but you've mastered them. I mean, it is just crazy to watch you master the end of the game and think, wow, that started with just like those first couple trips up the elevator.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, I think in earlier years, I didn't have the same command. And I do think that when you are willing to just keep going back into the fire, you give yourself more at bats to just keep getting better, keep getting more confident, and give yourself the grace to fail time to time, because that's going to happen. But when you do that, you look back and you say, man, the fact that I just kept getting back on the elevator is largely why I'm where I am. It was no secret. It was no formula. It was no one day. It was just a consistent approach of being willing to step back into something that maybe at times worried about or wondered it wasn't worth it. And when you just keep going back to the fire and keep stepping in, you look back after time and say, wow, look where we've gone.
Yeah. Very cool.
Let's talk a little bit about preparation. We've recently done some episodes on professional golf and elite golf and all the work that Doc has done and is doing in that field. And one of the principles that he brought up is as soon as, you make the shot, as soon as you hit the ball, you're already preparing for the next shot. It might be 10 minutes or 20 minutes away, but you shift into preparation mode. So when you come out of a game or you come out of a stressful moment, Kirk, what are the things that you have to do to prepare, to play again or to perform at your potential and to win, right? I mean, there must be this cycle, right, of execute, recover, perform. Can you talk through what and I don't think most people have any idea just how complex the preparation that an NFL quarterback must have to do in all aspects of your role.
Right. Well, for me, routine is a great comfort. And so I love, the Sunday to Sunday schedule and being able to stick to a routine where I know at 4 p.m. on a Friday what I'm going to be doing because I penciled it all in week to week and it just works like clockwork. So I think it's important after a game to come down from that. And so regulated breathing is a great way for me to, come down and kind of tell my body, okay, you're no longer in fight or flight. You now need to, relax, recover, go to sleep, get a good night of sleep, because that can be a challenge for me, win or lose after a game. I'm going to replay all the thoughts in my head, the game. And as a result, it's hard for my body to stay asleep or to get to sleep. And that's so important night after game to get that recovery. So, teaching your body to come back down. And then, Monday is a combination of body work, football review from the game, and then family time and really starting our preparation for the next opponent. Tuesday becomes my off day. And so I truly take Tuesday off. I would guess that most NFL quarterbacks do not do that. I'm kind of unique in that aspect. I think that it's important for me to push really, really hard for 6 days and then to always have built in that 24-hour window where I rest. So that's a priority of mine that I've always had. And I think it's served me well over my career and I'll continue to do it. But Tuesday becomes that day. And then Wednesday, it really begins our work week, and it's a long day. Thursday's also a long day, and that's where the meat of the preparation for our opponent goes in. But with that, I also make sure that morning, night, that there's important regulated breathing, and my mattress will track my sleep and let me know what my HRV was as I slept. And so there's a lot of data I'm trying to gather throughout the week to see how my body is feeling and recovering, and then I can kind of use that data to know where I'm at and if I have what I need for the next game.
I would imagine there's also an annual preparation schedule, right? I mean, you're talking about sort of the weekly rhythm, but there must be an annual rhythm too, as well. I mean, you're right now in the off season. So what kind of things go into sort of the annual preparation cycle for an NFL quarterback?
Well, one of the pieces that I've learned about trying to have success at a high level like pro football is that rhythms and routines become a great practice to have. And during the season, that's a weekly routine that you exercise to a daily routine that you exercise, which is important. But then there's, like you said, a yearly routine of where in July, this is how I spend July, this is how I spend February, and in March, this is always the important things to make sure that get done in March. And so certainly the off-season times, which is a great blessing to be able to get away and catch your breath, change your scenery, and change the demands placed on you. But with that, you lose the routine and structure of the football season. And so it's very important that in that lack of routine and structure, you don't either miss out on making the time productive, but also that you don't jam it so full with things that are really not the most important things to be doing. And so that's another thing Dr. Roy and I have talked through over the years is, what does the in-season routine look like? But what does the off-season routine look like? And what's the best way to invest that time and to spend that time? And sometimes the best way to spend it is to just sit on a beach and read a book. And I think Dr. Roy has given me permission to do that more than anybody else, which has really helped me. But also saying, hey, what are some creative, strategic ways that we can be cutting edge moving forward and how we use that time as well to better ourselves as a player and a person. And so we've tried to use the time in that way as well.
Yeah. I mean, watching you do that and develop those routines, I mean, I would say one of the most difficult things for any pro athlete or somebody who starts to enter this arena that everybody's looking and monitoring them at all times, or they're getting successful, is you can get sucked into so many things so fast. And it's been very interesting to watch you, Kirk, actually become even more limited or choosy about how you're doing those things, versus try to squeeze. And that's got to be a big factor in this inspiration. You know?
It's tough to say no to some great opportunities,
Yes.
but you have to say no to some good stuff to say yes to the best stuff. And just the other night, I was invited to sit courtside at an NBA basketball game. And it's like, I'd love to do that, but that would be saying no to my family and to spending time with my boys and to getting a good night of sleep. And so I'm going to have to pass. And while it breaks my heart to say no to that, I'm also saying yes to what's most important. And so I've learned through the years that, you're going to have to say no to stuff. I just didn't realize that when you're a NFL quarterback, the stuff you have to say no to is still some really good stuff.
Yes, very fun stuff. I think with that one, you've alluded to it a couple of times that we have to talk about our journey with sleep, the sleep,
Yes.
and your mindset about that. I know it's different today than it was, a dozen years ago. Can you speak to that and it in its role in this whole thing, how sleep impacts it all?
Well, in culture, there's this pervading thought that I think is quieting, but all my years growing up, the messaging was that, to be able to go on very little sleep is a badge of honor and a sign of strength.
Mm.
And the more you need sleep, that is a weakness. And what Dr. Royer taught me was that not only is that a bad way to look at life, but sleep is actually going to be one of your greatest assets to having the football career you want to have. And if you can be a better sleeper than the competition, you will probably be a better football player and beat the competition. And if not in this week's game, certainly over the long haul. And again, we have a sample size now to look back on that would suggest the accuracy of what he shared with me. So, he made a comment. I remember I'm a competitive guy. That never lived, and for some reason that stuck with me, that if you're saying it in almost a competitive way, that resonated with me, that it must really mean something. And so I thought, I want to be the best sleeper in the NFL. And that means carving out space for it. First of all, you got to be disciplined enough to go to sleep at a fair time. And then, if you're struggling to sleep, whether it be because of stress or because of environmental things, then, let's change those things. And so I met with sleep doctors that Dr. Royers introduced me to and kind of learned some of the tricks of the trade to become a better sleeper. And it's been a fun journey to go on. It was, been a lot of information gathering and it's been very eye-opening to become a better sleeper.
Can you, Kirk, right when you said, I don't know who you alluded to, but the phone kind of broke out a little bit, come back in. Could you do that first? It was like a minute. And then you started talking about me introducing you to doctors, which is all fine at that point, but we lost you for like 30 seconds there.
Okay. So I'll just kind of re-answer that question.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So, so I remember Dr. Royer when he first brought the concept of sleep to me and its importance. I realized that I needed to be the best sleeper I could possibly be. And many times in culture, the message is that it's a sign of strength if you can go on very little sleep. And it's a badge of honor in the football world if you can, make it on very little sleep. And yet we're learning now that sleep is foundational to our success, not only as football players, but to be healthy people. And so, I want to maximize my sleep and get as many hours as I can. And in the hours I do have available, I want to get the most quality sleep. And so, it's very important to me. And it's really Dr. Royer that awakened me to that reality. So I'm excited for, again, where my career can go from here, knowing that when you sleep well over many, many years, that starts to add up and have a compounding effect that I think will only show itself even more, that awareness and knowledge to apply that, to my patterns of how I try to take care of myself.
Awesome. Very good.
Kirk, let's talk about your eyes for a second, because one of the things that Dr. Royer is foundational to his approach is visual acuity, actually sensory acuity, right? I mean, the only way that our brain can connect with the outside world, obviously, is through our senses, and it's hard to imagine a profession that puts more demand on visual acuity than an NFL quarterback, in terms of the amount of things that are moving around you and the precision for you to be able to, perceive what's going on, execute. So I know that you've worked a lot with Doc on the visual piece. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of vision for an NFL quarterback, what some of the challenges are? I don't think most people really understand how complex what you're seeing in real time and how fast that's happening. And can you talk a little bit about the things that you've done to strengthen your visual acuity?
Yes. Again, one of the many areas where Dr. Royer has been cutting edge and talking about things that no one else is talking about, in addition to breathing, sleep, neural feedback, I would add vision. I think people understand it's important that your eyes can see and process, but they don't quite know then how do you improve it? What do you do with it? How do we measure it and quantify it and objectively know whether it's good enough or not? And that's where Dr. Royer's brought a lot of clarity to that area. And certainly as a quarterback, I mean, your visual processing has to be the best of the best. And you have to be able to gather information so quickly and make split-second decisions. And a millisecond of what your eyes can give you could be all the difference to how quickly you process and then move on to the next option or the next decision. So, I've been able to do a lot of vision training with Dr. Royer, and that's another thing that has really correlated with my play on the field. That when I've been diligent with those vision exercises and been able to see improvement in those areas, I tend to play better during those windows of time. And so it's one of those great correlations. And I'm, again, just grateful that I'm for Dr. Royer, that because I'd like to think that not many NFL players or NFL quarterbacks are truly aware of all these different areas where you can make yourself a better quarterback, better player. We're all weightlifting. We're all doing certain things that really, if you do them, you're not separating yourself. It's these types of things like vision training where you can truly separate yourself.
Yeah. Could you talk just for a second? I think it's just fascinating. The internet is an amazing thing. And so I can look up statistics on the time up from snap to release and, your time to snap to release or the average NFL time. I don't think most people can process the fact that you're talking about something that happens in like less than 3 Mississippis, right? I mean, it's 2.5, seconds. By the time the average person says, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippis, it's over. And so you have to process so quickly. And I imagine that has to do with the visual processing, but also, your mental focus and the ability of your brain to process. What kind of things you do to sharpen those tools?
Yes. I mean, it's anything from the vision training to the neural feedback. And I think even the breathing, can just sort of take away any of the cloudiness to the way you process and your mind works. And so, to get everything firing on all cylinders mentally, I think it's really a multifactorial deal, but I do think that sleep, breathing, vision, neural feedback all plays a major role in that. And, we've done things like even an IQ test with Dr. Royer just to get more information about, hey, are there anything we're missing? Is there anything that's lacking? So it's really been this decade of information gathering to learn where we're strong, learn where we're weak, try to strengthen those weaknesses so they become less relevant, and just continue to make sure that, there's nothing hiding in the weeds that's going to limit my career as a football player, and really more importantly, my health as a person.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Kurt, is that, yes, this is your profession. This is what you do. But as a person, these different things impact you as a human. And I think that would, I think, bring me to a question that I want to ask about this whole idea of being present or in the moment. How do you think that's changed for you? The ability to be present and in the moment versus, maybe a dozen years ago.
Yeah.
Do you notice anything?
I've always played my best when I'm truly present. There's nothing that, my mind is going to in the future that's I'm worrying about or applying onto the current moment. And then when you're not looking back at all and having anything in the past affect you, but to just truly be right where you are, it's amazing how simple that fact is, but also how difficult it is. And I think that's what Dr. Royer's communication with me has helped, is to remind me to keep going to the present and nowhere else, because it's almost like our natural default, certainly mine, is to go to anywhere but the present. And yet, once again, my best football has always been played when I think, part of the reason I had a great game was because I was just fully there. I wasn't worried about next week. I wasn't worried about, flight home and what I haven't been processing. I wasn't thinking about, anything outside of this game in this moment. And many times not even thinking outside of that play, where you're not thinking about, well, what if we don't get this third down and it goes to fourth down? Oh no. And just being right there on third down in the moment. It's hard to do, but it's also very simple. And when you can find that, it's a beautiful thing.
Are there specific, I just imagine the distractions are, beyond what most people can imagine. I mean, the noise, the lights, the things that are going on around you, the things that are happening off the field. Are there some specific techniques that help you sort of cope with all of those distractions?
Well, I think first of all, being aware of what are the thoughts that would be taking you out of the present, and to be able to call them what they are and get away from those. And I think the desire to be in the present is almost like, it's like freeing, because, the worry that comes with thinking into the future or thinking about the past, to just say, it's not healthy for me to do that. I need to just be focused on the present, and I'm going to give myself permission to do that. I think that's really freeing. But no, like I said, it's easy, and at the same time, it's difficult because it is abstract, and it doesn't happen naturally. And so, but I think just being made aware of it and reminding yourself of it is the first step to having it become more of a habit and a pattern you can benefit from.
Doc, as you work with Kirk and other professional athletes, elite athletes, what are the things that you specifically encourage them to do to train their ability to be present?
Yeah, and it is a skill. And I think we can see in the brain, and Kirk has seen us in his brain because we've looked at it so often. When the brain is processing too many layers of information, the fast brainwaves take off and these high betas take over. And that's when mistakes happen because we're not present. And, Kirk has diligently worked on decreasing those underlying brainwaves that drive the tendency to create the stressful scenarios and to be present as a baseline. That's very important, is that the neurological function gets stabilized. And that's something that he's worked on a lot. And then the breathing, when you bring that oxygen in, because 90% of the brain's energy comes from that, if you get that coherence going, it's almost impossible to get into these stressful states because the heart is functioning with the oxygen and everything's working well. But then the last thing, and Kirk and I have done this a lot, is really connecting with our senses, and trying to override the what ifs and the what abouts with what are my five senses experiencing right now? What does the ball feel like in my hand? What do I feel on my skin? What am I hearing? What am I seeing? What am I tasting? And as, like I said at the beginning, when I first met him as a college student, this guy's different. I mean, he takes it and he runs with it. It's not like, okay, yeah, that's pretty cool. Great. But Kirk applies these things 12 years later at the degree to, I think that really kind of brings us to kind of this last thing that we wanted to talk about in this episode, which was this idea of, why football, Kirk? I think you went to school as a pre-med student and you have a lot of talents. We've even heard you sing. And I think if anybody saw any of those clips on social media, right? Sing recently. So, I mean, you got these skills. Why?
Guys, I just lost you there a little bit. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes. Can you hear me now?
Okay. I heard you ask the question, why football? And then it kind of started to break up.
Sure. I'm going to pick up from there. Okay.
And I think it's still breaking up a little bit.
Still breaking. Tell me when it gets.
Yeah, it's breaking up.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you great.
You're still breaking up. Let's just hang on the line here a second and see if they can.
You're on the Florida Turnpike there? Out in the middle of nowhere.
I have good service, but clearly it's my service. I'm not sure what the deal is.
We hear you great, but you're not hearing us well. Do you want us to try reconnecting the call?
Hello, you got me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear us?
All right. Can you ask that question,
Sure.
why football again, and I'll answer it.
Sure. So, we wanted to kind of finish up, why football, Kirk, because, you have these. Go ahead.
Sorry, you're breaking up again, but I think I got you. We should be good. I have a bunch of service bars, so I shouldn't be having a problem. I'm not sure what the deal is.
Yep, all good. You go ahead and do your
okay.
answer.
We're clear. We're clear. I got you. So you said why football? You got other stuff like med school and whatnot. Why football? Do you want me to answer that question?
Plus your singing career.
Yeah, and also just in answering that, Kirk, if you also kind of talk about, how does the commitment to your sport, your craft, help pull all the threads together? Having a single sort of point of commitment.
Okay. I'm now at a point in my journey at 34 years old. I realize I have far more football behind me than ahead of me. And so it does kind of allow you to take stock of what does football mean to you and how do you want to appreciate these final few years that you play? And, why was it football? But I look back and I go back to, my joy and passion in life was always football. I mean, recess every day in elementary school, we'd go out and play football, no matter whether it was rain, snow, whatever, we were playing football. I played all of the other sports through the years and played basketball and baseball through high school, but football was always my passion. And so the fact that it worked out for me to be able to play in college was a dream come true. And if my journey had ended right there with college, getting a scholarship, that I would have thought that was still tremendous. So the fact that I got to play the way we did in college and then get drafted in the NFL, I mean, that was beyond a dream. And then to still be playing now a decade later, I'm just so grateful for where this journey has taken me. I am excited for other opportunities that will present themselves when I'm done playing football. And certainly many of those will be because of the football career and the doors that it opened. And I do in the off season enjoy sort of trying to build my life beyond just football and see what else is out there. But make no mistake, I understand that, God's given me a gift to throw football. He's given me a mind that can assimilate information quickly and do a lot of the processing that's required to play quarterback. And I want to maximize that gift and steward it well. And so, it's really been a joy to, just keep taking this gift as far as I can and keep trying to develop it and improve it. And then God has provided people like Dr. Royer to come alongside at just the right time to speak into my development and give me resources that I needed. And it's a little scary to think where I would be or not be if I had to run Dr. Royer over a decade ago. But so grateful that I have him in my corner, and he's just been a tremendous resource.
Well, Kirk, thank you so much for your time. And we're going to join you. Well, Kirk, thanks so much for your time. We're going to take a pause here and continue the conversation. So, Kirk, thank you for your time. We're going to take a pause here and continue the conversation, which will carry over into another episode. And I hope our listeners will join us, because in the next episode, we're going to ask you to, kind of apply these lessons that you've learned as an elite athlete, maybe to ordinary people. We're not all going to play in stadiums in front of crowds, but we all have arenas in our life where we have to perform. And what are the ways that we can learn from some of the things that you've experienced maybe and apply them in our ordinary lives? So thank you for your time. And I hope our listeners will join us on the next episode for more with Kirk Cousins. This has been the Inner Armor Podcast. You can find it wherever you get your podcasts. Would you please follow or subscribe, and make sure to leave us a review or comment. You can learn more about Inner Armor, Dr. Royer, and how to perform at your potential by going to forgeinnerarmor.com.